Page, Moshe, give me the page, 166, right?
166.
166, still in the...
I don't think...
what?
Yeah, I think we're in the top paragraph.
Yes.
I think.
Okay. The Rebbe said something very powerful here, which is another thing. It's hard to digest, but we need to. And that is that a person can understand concepts, godly ideas, understand them well, but he doesn't feel. This is the issue we've been talking about for a few weeks. And in this mimer, the Rebbe says the reason why he doesn't feel it is because he's bound to materialism. He says clearly to eating, drinking, and anger. That's what those are the three issues that he identifies in this mimer. And it's inside him. It's inside him. Meaning, even in his subconscious, it's there. So even when consciously he's not angry, but if he has anger in him, it's going to block. So that's very important. Sometimes you ask yourself, I'm in a good mood. I just learned. Why do I feel something? The Rebbe says the reason is because you have anger inside you. And until you get rid of that anger, subconsciously, he doesn't use those words, I'm paraphrasing. Subconsciously, that anger is going to be a blockage. And the same is true for the indulgences, from food to sleep to all kinds of other pleasures and everything else. An indulgence creates a state of being in the persona. Now, I think, those that know a little about, psychoanalysis, probably Freud would agree with some of that or all of it.
Mm-hmm.
Right, Hillel? That's pretty much it.
Yeah. I think that's a accepted idea in psychology.
Right. So that's, here you see that Rebbe wasn't a psychologist. And see, I always say, Chassidus is the best psychology. If you learn it properly, you think about what he's saying, it's so much, there's so many similarities. And anyway, so that's the Nikuda that we learned last week. But our objective is Yetzias Mitzrayim, because in a week and a half, we're walking out of Mitzrayim. Or better said, we need to walk out of Mitzrayim every day. So now we're going to get to now the Rebbe is going to explain that part. Let's go inside the mimer, okay? Oh, and one more thing he said that I didn't emphasize enough last week. He says, how do you bring what's up here into here? In this mimer, he says, use koil, sound, voice, music, singing. And this is also important. Sometimes, as much as you rationalize and you understand, it doesn't, sometimes, most times, it doesn't bring to that feeling. Says the Rebbe, go into a mode of singing, of music, of koil. Beginning with the simple idea of vidibarta bom, say the words out with your lips. When you read Gemara, Abaya Omer, Rava Omer, right? You could just read the text like this. Scan the text, like some scan a Zohar, right? You can scan the Talmud. You can say the words out with your mouth. That's one simple thing. That's Chazal teaches, v'dibarta bam. Then there is what's brought in Chassidus and other Svarim, the idea of koil. And here too, we see differences in koil from the yeshiva bacher who's singing. Amar Rava says there's a koil, there's a sound, there's a music, there's a tone. To the one who's singing, you look at some Hasidic art from Handel Lieberman and Moshe Braun. You look at the that they're singing the song. Right? In some of the Chabad you'll see they go like this. They I don't know what's the knack with the knack. In Yiddish will say knack with the finger knack, go like this, whatever the English word for that is.
Snap your finger.
Yeah.
Okay, that isn't just a mistake in the artist. That was the way Chabad Hasidim, when they identified with what's called the neimus, the sweetness of godliness. By understanding it, they expressed it with a knack of the finger, a knack of the finger. That. That's not here. That's not here. That's koil. Aha. And that's why they sang Nigunim. Sometimes a happy Nigun, sometimes a meditative Nigun that could sound, morbid, but it's not morbid, but, more dveikus. So koil is a very powerful tool. And there too, we have to explain that there's koil that's healthy and there's koil that's frankly foolish. Chas v'sholom, to say that a certain derech of Yidden, their koil is foolish. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying as an individual, come on, know yourself. If you really believe that screaming is helpful to you, then scream. Don't scream a shul by disturbing 20 people around you. But if that's your avoid,
unless you're down Lane Carlin.
Yeah, I believe me. I go to Carlin when I need to get a boost. When I need some, what do we call that? Not Gatorade. What's that other drink that they?
Red Bull.
Yeah. Yeah. So instead of that, you go into Carlin. No, but the point is, just in morning and davening, it was coming for Shacharis, right? If I don't raise my voice, usually the minyan is like, it's like a cemetery. No one, you hardly hear anybody. So sometimes I especially just daven a little louder part of davening, and then all of a sudden I hear people get it. People are starting to daven a little louder. That's all. It should feel like we're davening with B'tzibur, not in a cemetery, All these things are semantics, but the Rebbe is saying here, the individual, if you feel, so this is one answer to your issue is that you identify, your issue, our issue, but that you brought it out. Why is it that I understand the pain and I don't feel it? So we spoke about possibly why, because there are other blockages within your subconscious. I don't mean you, I mean us within our subconscious. And what's the solution? More importantly is, in this mimer, and there's others, answers another mimerim, he says, koil, use negina. In Chabad, you should know that negina played and plays a very big role. And I don't mean just a good song, good music. I'm talking about in avodah, especially when davening, if you get into a good nigun and you allow the nigun to take you, to swallow you, very therapeutic, very cathartic. So a nigun, which is koil, is another step, I would say a step 2, to the idea of a dibarta bum. And that's what the Rebbe suggests here. And by the way, this is very unique. You won't find a lot of this in different Maimorim. In other words, this is a unique advice. It's mentioned in Tanya and Geras HaKodesh, but to bring it here in a Maimor, I think, is a very unique thing. Any question on that? Okay, let's go on. The Rebbe says now, V'zeu rak yitzias Mitzrayim. Ava yesh seider madrega gavoya mazeh. The Rebbe says, when you talk about leaving Egypt, there are different gradations. There's barely getting out of the problem. You better get out of it, bro. This place is terrible. I have to leave. I met Shabbos someone because of COVID. He was living out in Potomac, Maryland. And he does, it's amazing the world we live in. He checks. He's a pathologist with a PhD from Kansas University. He checks for cancer online, on the screen, in S. Thomas, the Virgin Islands, while listening to Rabbi Gordon on Chabad.org. That's what he told me. Can you imagine? And he's working for that big pharmaceutical company, AstraZeneca. What is it, Hillel? Azer, the major company in America that Azer. I forget the name. How do you pronounce it? And,
I'm not sure which one you mean.
Yeah,
AstraZeneca, perhaps.
Thank you. That's the one. That's the one. Yes, sir.
They made one of the vaccines, right? They were in one of the groups that produced the vaccine.
I don't know.
COVID.
He says, yeah.
One of them.
Right. So he's sitting. He says, "I'm doing it online. What's the difference?" So he ran when COVID came. He ran to the Virgin Islands. It's gorgeous and beautiful. So him and his mother-in-law, they bought a villa there, and they don't have chinuch. That's an issue. There's a shliach there. Well, why am I saying this? There's Yetzias Mitzrayim. COVID comes, you run away. Then afterwards, you come back. What's the next step? So the Rebbe says here that the first step is to vacate, get away from the problem, Yetzias Mitzrayim. Then you have to internalize it. Look further. V'hu re'usa deliba. The next thing is where it becomes this escape, the great escape from Egypt and Egyptian culture and mindset needs to become the will of your heart. This is brought in the Zohar HaKadosh. Re'usa is the Aramaic for ratzon. The liba is the Aramaic for lev. The will of the heart.
Is there an implicit distinction here when he's talking about ratzon deliba from what we normally think of as ratzon, which is more associated with the moah?
Absolutely. Well said. Oh, there's pages and pages on what you just said now in Chassidus. Pages. Especially in the discourses on Rosh Hashanah. Because Rosh Hashanah, it says it's a kol mama, it's a sound that comes from very deep within. So there are, it's brought in the Kabbalah, but the Rabbeim in Chabad Chassidus really delve into this concept. And they say that the koil coming from the shofar is coming from Re'usa Deliba. So there's a lot of work over there. If you care to, when it comes to Shana time, I can give you some references where to learn. But in a nutshell, what you said is correct. Re'usa Deliba is not the Ratzon of Moach. Guys, I don't know if you understand what Hillel said. He said a very important thing. There is a will coming from an intellectual understanding. That's not what we're talking about here. Here we're talking about something much deeper in the subconscious, which it becomes like from inside yourself. And we call that Rusa Deliba. So the Rebbe says, how do you transform darkness to light? You have to have Rusa Deliba. And what does this mean? Yonis. The avodah of Yetzias Mitzrayim is what we call in classical Chassidus iskafia. Subjugate yourself. Control yourself, Moshe. Get away from the problem. But running away from the problem doesn't solve the problem. The problem is still there. Comes step 2, which is hisabcha. Transformation. Oh, in other words, internalize the escape, internalize what you did and why you did it, and it should become part of you that you will never do it again. That can only come from very deep within, which we call Rusa Deliba. Is it clear? And that's why he calls it Hisabcha Sheichel Nahira. When we left Egypt, we were goofballs. We were into the Avodah Zarah. You think we changed overnight? No, God did us a big favor. He said, get out of here. Move. This is not for you. Leave. And I'm forcing you out. So we had no choice, we left. Then came Sfiras HaEmer. What happened, Sfiras HaEmer? We internalized, why did God do this? Hey, we had a great life in Egypt. We have all the comforts. Oh, there's something wrong. It's a Christian culture. It's an Egyptian culture. There's lots of things that tempt us, and they're disguised with a mask. Like someone at the Fabrenga Shabbos says, I know you guys, some of you guys are going to these Pesach programs. And he's talking to Lubavitchers. He says, but let me tell you something. It would be better if you went to a Gebrutz program with a weak hechsher. So then you know that you're doing something wrong. Instead of going to the program with 10 hechsherim, no Gebrutz, and you feel, oh, I'm so holy, I'm so religious, I can even keep, right? He says, so the guy who mentioned this, Rabbi Gestetter from Yerushalayim, from Mayonot, he happened to be with us for Shabbos too. So he was telling them, and I thought it was great. He said to them, no, you shouldn't feel good about it being at the Pesach program. Yeah, your wife wants it, you're there. Whatever, you're there. But, my friend, we don't celebrate Pesach in Pesach programs. We celebrate at the house. That's the way we were trained as kids, and that's the way the real, because Pesach is such a difficult yom. Anyway, why am I saying this? Because we left Mitzrayim. Yeah, okay. Mitzrayim, we had it good. Yes, we were slaves, but in many other ways, it was great. And the proof is that we actually worship their culture. So that's why comes Sfiras HaEmer and says, it's a big mistake. Hashem took you out of here because he saw, if he doesn't, what does it say in Medrash? Hillel, what does it say? We were sunk
50th gate.
Yeah. We were almost gone. And it would be
swept away.
Yeah, swept away. Exactly. Hashem had mercy. Think about that when it comes Pesach night, next Friday night. Just think about how we owe thanks and gratefulness to Hashem for saving us, although we wouldn't be here. We would not be here. Okay? It's hard to imagine. How can you say the Jewish people wouldn't be here? Well, when you assimilate, and we all know what that means, because Nebuch, I'm sure we know people, relatives, others who married out and all that, and what's left, I told you, in Petaluma, California, north of Marin County, where I was, there was a conservative shul. And I went into the social hall one time, and I saw pictures on the wall, black and white, large pictures of gatherings in the shul from the 1920s and 30s. So I asked, where are their grandchildren? And I was told, they're Lutherans. Most of them are Lutherans. Rahman al-Islam.
In Petaluma, they're deadheads.
Okay, maybe the deadheads too. Maybe the deadheads too.
That's like the regional flag of Petaluma, California.
Okay. Well, my neighboring town was Petaluma, and with the chicken farms. I have a lot to tell you about that, but not now. But anyway, so they wanted to start the kibbutz movement there. You know that. The original settlers were socialists, Bundists from Russia, and they were hoping to make there the kibbutzim that they made in Eretz Yisrael, not, of course, anti-religious and all that. And what's the result? That all the grandkids are all goyim, Lutherans, not just goyim. Rahman al-Islam, Hayalosiya. So, guess what? We weren't far from that in Mitzrayim. We were not. It's to me, it's like such a scary thought. So the Rebbe says, what saved us? Now, here's the question. God took us out, so Hashem saved us, right? The answer is, we would have gone right back in. We would have been lured right back into the Mishagas. What saved us is the next process, Sfiras HaEmer, transformation. Taking the darkness and converting it to light. That's what he says. Back to the text. The activity of serving God with logic only brings one to subjugation, to control. But the avodah known as the service of the will of the heart, coming from the very deep subconscious, this vacates you from the entire notion of limitations. In other words, there is a limitation, and I need to understand that I'm limited by it and be careful from it and find ways to get out of it. But Moshe, even when you get out of such a limitation, the limitation still exists. And the Rebbe says that as important as that is to vacate that limitation, you have to know it's only a beginning, and if you get stuck there, you're playing with fire. And we see this. We see this today too. How many people do not graduate and leave the first step of their tshuva in everyone, from the FFB to the BT, makes no difference. They fall right back into it. I see it. Today we see this so much more, where people who are 50, 60 years old, they fall back. What's going on? It used to be that it's teenagers and young adults that are having issues with God and all of that, and religion. What happens? A person's 20, 30 years religious, has a family, and all of a sudden he checks out. What's going on? And it's happening. It's happening. And it's not happening that he's just dropping his wife and going with another woman or for another woman. That's also an issue. It's in every area from religion. The answer is that there was no graduation. There was a coasting on a certain level for many years, and kids, family, and community kept you coasting. And then when you're an empty nester and you're by yourself with your wife, I know someone, I'm thinking of someone particular now, he just left New York, went to Florida, hanging out on South Beach, and like, my God, what are you doing? What are you doing? And I asked him, because he's a friend, I asked him, like, well, my kids are out of the house. Wow, what a Yiddishkeit. That's Judaism. And this is happening in various ways. So how do you change that? Says the Rebbe, it comes through adapting an attitude and coming to a point that your Yiddishkeit, your connection to God, goes beyond limitations. In other words, if you want it to be permanent and real, you need to come to a point where you're experiencing limitless. You're experiencing Gru'usa lArba in the language of the Maimer. Then, regardless of where you are and when you are and how old you are, it makes no difference. You understand? So, if my rabbi's not around, my wife's not around, my kids are not around, my God is around because He's in me. That's what, and it's a Gemara, right? Ein mispalelin ela metoich koved rosh, a Gemara in Brachos. You're not supposed to get up to Damish Menesrei without the sense of koved rosh, heaviness of the head, meaning Yiras Shamayim. What does that mean? That tefillah is independent of your surroundings. You don't need a shul to be a Yiras Shamayim. So if you're in Wyoming or New Mexico, and you find yourself there and there's no minyan, you get up and daven the same way like you would daven in Bet Shemesh or in Borough Park. What's the difference? For whatever reason, that's where you have to be right now, and there's no minyan, and there's no rabbi, and there's no wife, and there's no kids, and you're by yourself. That's the proof. And that can only come when you have inculcated the connection where it goes beyond just a yitziyah, a vacating Yitziat Mitzrayim. It becomes your reality. That's what he's saying here. Let me just finish the two words. That's how you cause transformation of darkness to goodness. So that's the answer to a very powerful question How do we accomplish? Moshe, how do we accomplish? The answer is you have to work on yourself to the point where you've taken the problem and transformed it. Now, Hillel, probably this is part of the philosophy of the 12-step program. I'm not, very well versed in it, but only when you hit rock bottom. So, could we say that the hitting rock bottom would be the moment of transformation? Would that be fair to say, Isser Hillel? Would that be fair to say?
Well, that is certainly the way it's looked at. And almost it needs to be. It's understood as being an essential component.
Isser, what's your thoughts?
It's really not in my wheelhouse that level, but it reminds me of the comparison of Klal Yisrael leaving Mitzrayim to a seed that decomposes in the ground before it sprouts upward. That if it stays, if it decomposes just a little bit more, it's destroyed. But it has to go to that state of right before total loss, and then from that sprouts the new plant.
Right.
Kusta de Chiyusa, what's that phrase from the Zohar?
Kiyusta de Chayusa. But that, no, are you referring to like the kernel?
Like a sprout, right? The sprouting
the
kernel.
Shalom brings this analogy in many places.
Right.
And that's...
I'm trying to remember the phrase.
And that's what he uses, right.
Yeah.
But this is, you learn them... I don't know, I learned this. It's so real to me. It's like... It's happening. This is not like, the Rebbe said this Maimer in 1940 in Lakewood. It's now 2022. That's 72 years later or whatever. It's real. It's really real. And it's an avodah. So, yes, Pesach is about Yetzias Mitzrayim. The emphasis is on the Yetzia. Right? Avram, you with me? Leaving, vacating. But we need to know that if you want it to be permanent, you have to take that Yitzhak and inculcate it, internalize it. Otherwise, you can fall right back in. And it's true from dieting. You see it in so many ways. It's a constant avodah. Any final thoughts, questions, Chevra? Anything? Anyway, I want you all to get ready. On Wednesday, we're releasing a wonderful video that I did. I interviewed Moshe Braun here, Reb Moshe. So we'll send it out. I want you to forward to everyone in Bet Shemesh. I think you'll learn a lot, and I want to thank Moshe for cooperating. It's not easy to get yourself on a screen and be interviewed and then have the world see it. And once it goes online, the world sees it. But Baruch Hashem, the interviews that I've done have been received very, very well. From Label Wolf, last week I did Lee Slavutin, Eliezer Slavutin from Australia, who I learned with him Tanya for 10 years. I told you about him, and very important. He talks about Mashiach. He talks about many things, and again, he has a medical degree, a law degree, and he decided to go into insurance. Very interesting story, and there's a lot to learn from these interviews. I feel that's why I'm doing them. I'm not doing it, for myself. I'm doing it for people to learn from the messages that we share. So do look forward to that. See everyone. Zeigazon, have a good day. Tzlacha. Bye-bye. Take care.